I'm pumped and excited to share with you guys 3 elements of the hive inspection that are kind of frustrating if you don't get them right. Hey everybody, David Burns, good to be with you today. Hope you're having a great day. Let's jump right into it. What are the 3 essential elements of a hive inspection? Number 1, the most important thing is to be able to successfully evaluate your brood. I'm talking about eggs, larvae, and pupae. This is really tough for the new beekeeper, and I would say a new beekeeper is anyone that's been keeping bees less than 5 years, because after 5 years, you got enough experience under your belt that you've learned a thing or two. But up until about the 5-year point, it can still kind of be new experiences that you keep running into. So today, let's talk about the first element, and that is the brood: eggs, larvae, and pupae. Now, this is really important when you jump into a hive. You want to start looking for eggs and larvae and pupae to see how healthy, how well your hive is doing. And so it's not just the queen that you're evaluating when you're looking at brood. You are, but it's the hive's ability to raise that brood. So they need a lot of nurse bees. They need all the other bees to do their jobs in order to raise that brood. So you're evaluating really the entire colony by seeing how well your brood is doing. The eggs are sticking straight up in each cell. I'm going to have a video toward the end of this video that I'll refer you to, that you can watch how to help you see your eggs better, because I know that's kind of hard to do, but you got to be able to see the eggs. And these eggs are laid by the queen, and she lays about 1,000 to almost 3,000 a day in the heat of the beekeeping season, spring and early summer. And so you should see a lot of eggs. And when you do, it means you got a good laying queen. If you don't see a lot of eggs, it probably means your queen needs to be replaced. A lot of beekeepers don't understand that part of beekeeping, and they keep a failing queen in the hive way too long, not laying enough eggs, and the hive eventually gets weak and perishes. The second stage of the developing brood is the larvae stage. And so once the eggs are past the 3-day point, they begin to become larvae. And some people call them grubs. They look like little grubs in the bottom of the cells there. But here's how you need to be able to examine your larvae. You want to look at the larvae and say, aha, pearly white. All larvae should look pearly white. And it should be glistening. Why is glistening so important? A lot of beekeepers don't understand the glistening aspect of that larvae. The glistening means it's healthy and well fed. If it's not glistening, it's unhealthy and not fed. It's drying out and dying. Pearly white larvae, glistening. That's how you know the larvae is in good shape. The bees have to feed that larvae. You know, they feed it royal jelly up to day 3. Past day 3, they continue feeding it, but they go for a more, what we call worker brood food for worker bees. If they were to raise a queen, that would keep feeding it royal jelly past day 3 in the larvae stage. And so that's what you're looking for. How much larvae do you have? The third stage is the capped over brood. Now, how do you evaluate capped over brood? There's a couple of ways you do it. First, you look at the brood to see if there's any perforation or holes in the caps of the pupae. If there's holes in it, that means you either have a very hygienic hive that's culling out the pupae that may have some mites down in there, or if there's holes in it, it could mean that you have a disease like American foul brood. And so you always want to make sure your caps are well capped over, no holes in them, and you want to look for what we call a solid brood pattern. If you have a lot of misses where there's some cells that there's not a developing pupae in it, it's empty, or it has something else in it besides brood, it may mean you have a bad queen, that she's not laying enough eggs. And so that's what we call a spotty brood pattern. So you want to have a good looking brood pattern. So that's one of the first essential things that you need to get under your belt: the ability to open up a hive and look for eggs, look for larvae, look for capped over pupae, and evaluate how much of that you have. Now, before we get into the second essential elements of beekeeping, let me let you guys know that on November the 28th, 2024, through Cyber Monday, December 2nd, we're going to be offering all of our online courses at 50% off. I'll leave a link right here. Check those out. And I'd love to be able to teach you more about beekeeping. Now, the second element is an important one too, and it's all about the resources in the hive. A hive with poor nutrition will not do well, even with a great laying queen. A lot of beekeepers don't understand that. They think that if they have a good laying queen, that all will be well. But it takes a lot of food, a lot of resources to support a good laying queen, because it takes a lot of food to feed developing brood. So get that in your mind, that you have to have a lot of resources in the hive. Resource really is categorized into essentially, first, let's go with nectar. That's a liquid type sugar they get from the nectaries of flowers. They bring it back to the hive, and you're going to open up your hive, do your inspection, and you're going to be looking for nectar. It's not honey, it's nectar. It's not honey yet. It can turn into honey, but right now it's a glistening liquid in your comb, and it's pretty moist. The moisture content can be as high as 70% or even a little bit higher from the flowers. So they have to dry it down to where it's about 16 or 17% before they cap it off and call it honey. So they really dry out the moisture of the nectar. So what you're looking for is nectar. Bees will be bringing that in. They won't cap it off unless they have enough that they want to store. When they cap it, they're storing it for the future. When it's uncapped, they're using it right now to feed brood and feed themselves. Now, another element of the resource is pollen. As they go about the flowers and gather that nectar, they're also collecting pollen. It sticks to their bodies, they pack it in their back legs. That fertilizes plants. So from one plant, they gather pollen grains and they go to the next flower to get some nectar. And some of the pollen grains fall off on that flower, and that's germination. That's fertilization. They're fertilizing the plants. That's how plants get fertilized. But meanwhile, they're gathering that pollen and bringing it back to the hive, and that's their protein. So they carry it back on their hind legs, the foragers do, and they drop it back in the hive, and they store it in comb. It can be all different, beautiful colors, but that's what you want to look for. Make sure your bees have an ample supply of pollen to use for food, to feed their brood, to feed each other. They need pollen. That's their protein. Now, another type of food that you're going to see in the hive, in addition to nectar, honey, and pollen, is bee bread. Bee bread is a combination of pollen and nectar and enzymes from the bees that begins to ferment, and that's the way they store pollen for their future. And it looks a little bit like wet pollen, and that's what bees will use for future protein in the hive. So when you do your inspection, you're not just looking for the brood, but you're also looking to see, do my bees have enough food for the future? Now, before I jump into the final and third element, the important part of the bee inspection, let me encourage you guys to please subscribe. Bobblehead David is here with his little subscribe symbol. A lot of you view my videos and watch them. Thank you so much. But not many of you are subscribed as watch it. So I really would appreciate you taking a moment to subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything. You'll be notified each time I make a new video. So the third element of the hive inspection that's so important, in fact, it's more important than the other two, that's mite control. And why do I say it's more important? Well, no matter how well fed your bees are, no matter how well your queen's laying brood, mites will take them out. Because mites reproduce in the capped cell of developing pupae. And so if your queen is really doing good laying a lot of eggs, it gives the mites a lot more opportunity to reproduce. And so you have to stay on top of controlling the varroa destructor mite, or you're going to lose your colony. There's no way around that. That's simply put, it's one of the most essential things, if not the most essential things in beekeeping. And it's kind of one of the hardest things, especially I think new beekeepers struggle with this the most, namely because new beekeepers really don't want to do an alcohol wash to test for mites. It means we're going to have to kill 300 bees. An alcohol wash is when we wash 300 bees in alcohol to make the mites fall off. Then we can count the mites that were on 300 bees. What we're looking for is less than 3 mites per 100 bees. And if we keep it below that level, then our hives won't be overtaken by viruses that the mites pass around in the hive. And so that's an important part of beekeeping is mite control. And the best way to do it is test. Now, some people say, I don't want to test. Why can't I just treat? Well, you will be wasting your money if you don't need to treat. And some treatments have been known to fail. So you may have high levels and not know it. You may use a treatment without doing a test. And then when you treat for mites, what if the treatment fails and you don't test again? You don't know that the treatment didn't work and you still have a high amount of mites. So testing just helps you keep your levels where it needs to be. Now, you may be thinking, okay, I understand this. Now, what is the timing for my inspections? So how often, how frequently should I inspect? I recommend you inspect your hive every 2 weeks. So let's say you inspect your hive on May the 1st. What you're looking for on May the 1st is making sure that you do have good brood, eggs, larvae, pupae, all looks good. And you're also looking for your resources, bee bread, nectar, pollen, honey. Make sure they have plenty of stores on board and everything is good. You close it up, you're done. Now, the next time you inspect, let's see, 2 weeks later, it's going to be May the 14th. Now you're going to inspect for those same things, but also this time you're looking more specifically for mites. So once a month, you're going to be doing a mite check every 30 days to make sure your mite levels are kept low. That's important too. So that's kind of the timing of it. Now in the spring, during swarm season, it's a good idea to inspect your hive once a week to look for swarm cells. See how simple this is? Now, some of you are kind of like, okay, David, you talked about 3 things. You talked about brood, you talked about resources, you talked about mites. But what about all the other things you didn't talk about? Small hive beetle, wax moth, all this other struggles that we go through with everything. Well, here's the deal with that. I'm teaching you right now, these are the three most important things that you need to know. It really is. If you don't keep these three under control, it doesn't matter about anything else. For example, wax moths are kept under control when you do the three things that I mentioned. You don't have to worry about wax moths. So, and usually you don't have to worry about a lot of things if your population, your brood is good, and if your resources are good in the hive, you don't have to worry about a lot of things. So let me kind of break this down with the analogy of a car. A car, essentially, you only need to know three things. How to turn it on. You're going to turn a key or take a fob in there, right? And so that will start the car. Now there's two more things you need to know. Accelerating and stopping, and steering. So going and steering, starting, going, and steering. Those three things. If you know those three things, you can pretty much go around the country, do your things, and everything's great. But let's face it, a lot more to driving a car than those three things, right? But those three things, they get you down the road. So in beekeeping, these three things will get you down the road, okay? Looking at brood, evaluating brood, looking at resources, evaluating resources, looking at mites, evaluating mites. Those three things will keep you going down the road in beekeeping, but it's a little tricky to master that. It's a little tricky sometimes to understand, what am I looking for? How do I know I have enough brood? Now, let me drop back and talk about brood for a minute. Before I do, let me tell you there's a live stream coming up tonight. I'm looking forward to it. 7 o'clock if you're watching when I release this video. 7 p.m. every Thursday night, going to be talking about beekeeping, and I'm going to be specifically talking tonight why bees die. This may be really informative for you. But we're also going to be answering all of your questions. We've got some giveaway plans. Right here is the link. I hope you'll join me at 7 p.m. Now let's get back to brood though, because a lot of people don't really understand, how do I evaluate my brood? What am I looking for? You're looking for a lot of capped over brood. That tells you that bees will be emerging really soon. Usually from the time the egg is laid, a worker bee will emerge 21 days later. So once it's capped over on around day 8 or 9, you got bees that are going to be emerging really soon within a week and a half, and that's going to be more bees to the workforce. So you need good capped over brood when you do your inspection. You need a lot of eggs. Eggs tell you that there's going to be more bees. So you're always looking for lots of brood. You need lots of brood. And how much resources do you need in the hive? That depends on the season, really, as it does with brood too. There's not as much brood like in late summer and fall, but there's a lot of brood in the spring. Kind of the same way as resources as well. Bees are bringing in a lot of resources in the spring and the summer. Resources dwindle when we hit a dearth, a period of time when there's not much flowers out there. So it depends on the season, but what you want to be looking for is that there is enough brood on board in storage or available to the bees that all the frames aren't empty. If there's nothing in there, it means you need to feed them, right? And if there's little to no brood, it means you need to replace the queen. See how simple this is? And if you start looking and seeing high mite counts, it means you need to treat your hive. These are the three elements of beekeeping that if you focus on these three things and stop spending all your time on buying the best hat and veil, buying the best tool, buying the best this or that, and learn these three elements of beekeeping that are essential in your inspections, your hive will do so much better. Now, let me tell you about the book that Sherry and I wrote. If you're new to beekeeping or you're starting next spring, this book will be really helpful. It's called Backyard Beekeeper, Everything You Need to Know to Start Your First Hive. And Sherry and I wrote this together, and we really are proud of it. We were contacted by a publishing company to write this book. I think it's really helpful for new beginners that are starting out, and it will help you understand beekeeping. If you've been keeping bees a little while, and you still want a little bit more information on beekeeping, it's going to be a good book for you. If you buy it from us, we'll make sure we autograph it for you. Now, I promise to refer you to a video helping you understand and find the eggs in the hive. They're kind of hard to see. This video, I show you what to do to better find those eggs, ensuring that your hive is in good shape for the future. Check it out. I'll see you guys over there.